clean that trap out, Brad. Clean it good. Oh, you motherfucker, don't tell me what I should do.
I'm the Lord of the Harvest.
Who's that? Some new health food bunch?
Try anything and you're canceled, bro. Oh, fuck.
The review I'm about to perform is an account of a tragedy that befell an entry in the slasher genre. It is all the more tragic in that, while the film had some tacky attempts at social satire, it was so far the best retro revival slasher in recent years. Its moment in the spotlight was cut short, but perhaps one day people will be able to appreciate it for what it is. I am of course talking about the 2022 sequel to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a fucking weird series to me. I was never really huge on it. Like, I thought the first one was grimy and cool, and taking into account the year it was made, 1974, it was far ahead of its time. I like it, but I rarely get the desire to watch it. It drones on, and on top of that, there's something about movies from the 70s that make them hard for me to sit through. There are exceptions, of course, but for the most part, it's just not my bag. Although the idea of a family of backwoods inbreds abducting, killing, and eating people would be a concept used for many years to come. And it all started with this movie. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre was a major success. It made $30 million against an $80,000 to $140,000 budget, and I'm guessing this was like a must-see water cooler type movie in the day. I'll always remember the story that my grandmother went to see it when it came out, and it fucking traumatized her so bad that she couldn't sleep for like a week. Now, I'll address the elephant in the room. I know I announced a rank and review of the series a while back, and I didn't deliver, and that's quite frankly because, in my opinion, the series is relatively mid, and I couldn't muster up the motivation to sit through fucking 9 movies that maybe have 3 to 4 installments I actually enjoy. So in lieu of that, I will go over each movie very quickly before I get to the most recent one that I'm doing the review, and you just got my opinion on the first one, so naturally, with the success of the first movie, it was decided that a sequel was in order. Not in a timely fashion, they had to wait for Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street to end up becoming profitable enough to warrant endless sequels. Tobe Hooper was brought in for the second movie once more, and apparently he did not want to do it, but...
Oh! They drove a dump truck full of money up to my house. I'm not made of stone.
So he made a complete fucking mockery of his movie. This movie is just like really bizarre. It's a comedy, sort of. It takes place years after the first. Dennis Hopper plays a sheriff who wants revenge on Leatherface. Caroline Williams plays a radio DJ who overhears 2 dudes get killed by Leatherface in a really over-the-top scene, and the rest of the movie is kind of boring. Bill Moseley plays Leatherface's brother Chop Top, who wasn't in the previous movie because he was in Vietnam. It's weird, it kind of goes for a bit, and then it just kind of slogs on, and the climax has Dennis Hopper having a chainsaw duel with Leatherface, and then everybody gets blown up by a grenade. It's fucking wacky, and I kinda like it, but again, I rarely feel the urge to sit through it. I love the poster being a parody of The Breakfast Club, though. A few years later, when slasher movies were kinda on the outs, New Line got a hold of the rights and made another sequel. It doesn't reference 2 outside of a Caroline Williams cameo, but it introduces a whole new family and is pretty much just a basic slasher movie. It has the pacing of a Friday the 13th. It's decent, but I think the most memorable part is the trailer and Alfredo Sawyer, who is like, what the fuck, man?
You remind me of my last girl, down in Tupelo. Well, you're gonna go down below. Is it soup yet?
Oh, and a young Viggo Mortensen's in it. This one's shitty, but it's an easy watch. It's like enjoyably shitty.
What are the chances of a brainless bitch like you knowing how to use that thing?
Pretty goddamn good, you backwoods motherfucker.
And following that, there was Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the new generation, which I've never sat through this one. I remember when I was like 5 years old, the box art freaked me out and I couldn't sleep. I don't know why, it just disturbed me as a kid, but yeah. This one's actually the first remake of the original. It's a basic retelling of the first movie, but then the Illuminati shows up and there's like UFOs or some shit from what I've heard, and Renee Zellweger had like her first starring role in it. This one was bad from what I heard. I'm not gonna sit through it. The franchise would go on hold after New new generation, and at one point around the year 2000, Tobe Hooper's son actually was trying to put together a movie called All-American Massacre. This would have been one part prequel, one part sequel to the second movie. It would have followed Bill Moseley's Chop Top character who survived the events of 2 and ended up in a nut house, where he would tell the story of his time in Vietnam before he breaks out and kills a bunch of people. Apparently, it was actually mostly finished, but William Hooper ran out of money and the project was shelved. All that exists of it is a trailer. I don't know how much there is from what he filmed, but I would love to see this get a release someday, even if it's just a work print. 3 years would pass when Platinum Dunes would remake the movie. The remake is fine. It's not like good, it's not bad, it's just fine. This changes up the dynamic a bit, makes it darker and more in tune with this era of horror. It's still when horror was rated R, but I find it to be a bit boring, although that fucking jump scare at the start got me so good as a kid.
Come on back here, follow me.
Leatherface looks good, but the real fucking highlight is R. Lee Ermey as the sheriff. He is such a fucking prick, but you'll love to hate him.
We got something else in common now.
After the remake, a prequel to the remake was released, and this is actually better than the fucking remake. It's nothing special, but the fucking gore in it is delicious, and it's a fun slasher movie. I enjoy watching Beecher get disemboweled with a chainsaw. The series would go on hold once again until 7 years later, when it was decided to do sort of a reboot, but it was more like a direct sequel to the first one. This one's like, meh. It's not terrible, but it's not good either. They try to make Leatherface the kind of protagonist in a way by revealing that after the events of the first film, the police killed his entire family besides him and a baby who gets adopted and eventually finds her way back. And yes, that's Alexandra Daddario, one of the hottest women in existence. It's a bit of a slog, but it has its moments, but I always cringe just a little bit when Daddario finds out their family and she ends up helping them.
Do your thing, cuz.
And then there's the 2017 movie Leatherface, which was a direct-to-VOD, not DVD, not streaming, a direct-to-VOD prequel to the original, and it fucking stank. I'm not wasting my words on this piece of trash. It was awful. Don't watch it. Don't even pirate it. Don't even fucking waste your time. Don't dignify it by acknowledging its existence. It's a piece of fucking shit. This is one of the most confusing series of horror movies in terms of continuity. You see, you have the original movie, then a sequel to the original movie, and then a second sequel that has references to the previous sequel but acts more like a standalone. Then you have a remake, then you have another remake, and a prequel to the remake, and then a direct sequel to the original, and a prequel to the original. Like, Jesus fucking Christ, it's just all over the place. The only other fucking horror series that's more jumbled is Halloween, which, as of now, has 4 different continuities, not counting Season of the Witch. With that being said, in 2022 has decided to do a direct sequel to the original once again, this time as a Netflix exclusive. Legendary Pictures got the rights, and my god, this series has been passed around so many different production companies. Principal photography took place in Bulgaria, and it was released on Netflix in 2022, and it was lambasted by critics and audiences alike. Now, here's the thing, y'all saw me shit on Halloween Kills. Well, you know where this is going. No, you don't, because I have no intention of shitting on this movie, because I like this movie. It was really fun. It was a breath of fucking fresh air. The basic premise is that a group of rich entrepreneurs have decided to buy out a busted up old ghost town in rural Texas in order to auction off a bunch of property to create a gentrified town for rich people. I badmouth the wokeness, and it does get fucking tired fast, but I have no problem with them satirizing this aspect of modern culture whatsoever. The two main characters are sisters Lila and Melody. Lila is an amateur photographer who survived a school shooting, and Melody is her sister who is part of the big business deal of buying out the town. Immediately, they try to force an old woman out of her home after removing her Confederate flag, and when they tell her to leave, she has a heart attack, royally pissing off the hulking brute who she was taking care of. One of the girls goes in the ambulance with them. Meanwhile, Lila hangs around a local mechanic who has an AR-15, and despite being a survivor of a school shooting, she is interested in guns. I don't know what they were going for here. I'm not going to talk about gun control because I live in a country where we actually have gun control. Either way, Lila seems to be suffering from some form of survivor's guilt from the school shooting. So the old woman croaks, and yeah, I'll get this out of the way. The big dude's Leatherface, and he goes fucking ballistic and kills everybody. Oh, and by the way, the old woman is the actress who played the Borg Queen in Star Trek First Contact, and the sheriff is Gorman from Aliens. Those are about the only recognizable faces in the movie. So, in a funny twist, we find out that the rich investors might not even own the property that they kicked the woman out of because they don't have the deed. The black dude swears they left it back at the office and that they didn't boot the old lady out of her own house. Okay, now this part, at first I thought, oh, well, this is just a cheap attempt to steal the concept from the recent Halloween movies. We see Sally, the survivor from the first movie, is now a hardened badass Texas Ranger, and she finds out Leatherface is back and decides to gear up and get her revenge. I'm gonna come back to this later on because it's not what I was expecting it to be. So they do in fact find out that the woman still has the deed to her house, so they literally caused her to have a heart attack, and Leatherface butchers the black dude while Melody hides under the bed. Now, this is another subversion they did. The mechanic with the gun is set up to either be a dick or in on the killings. As is typical in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies, there's always someone in the town who appears to be benign but ends up being part of the family. But nope, earlier on, he took the group's bus keys away until they prove that they have the deed to the property. And when he goes to confront Leatherface, he fucking eats it, and this scene is the most intense scene in the movie. I'm normally against the use of CGI for gore, but because of the low lighting of the room, it actually works very well. I cringed so hard when the dude's leg fucking folded from the hammer, like, ugh. And of course, with his last ounce of strength,
You pointed to W and S.
I mean, he gives Melody the keys before Leatherface brains his fucking skull in. So in the meantime, everybody just decides to hide in the bus rather than try to make a break for it, and Lila decides to go look for Melody, not aware that there's a crazed, cross-dressing, cannibalistic chainsaw murderer on the loose. The black chick on the bus, who was there when the black dude died, tries to keep Lila from going, but it doesn't work, and we get a pretty neat little sequence where after trying to make a break for it, Melody is chased by Leatherface while crawling under the floorboards. It was predictable, but it was a neat little sequence nonetheless, and she gets covered in shit from a shit pipe because, you know, shit. Of course, Lila manages to free Melody, and I must say, they built this entire set pretty much from the ground up in a rural town in, like, Bulgaria, and it looks glorious. It actually looks like a small mid-southern town, and because it's fucking deserted, it makes all the horror sequences a little more impactful. So finally, the two main characters get on the bus, and it looks like it's home free for the protagonist. That's what I'd be saying if this wasn't a slasher film. Leatherface gets on the bus after slashing the tires, and this part kind of starts off as cringe, but honestly, it recovers so fucking fast.
Try anything and you're canceled, bro.
This is the kind of scene I fucking wanted from Halloween 2018 and Halloween Kills. This scene is fucking straight up berserk, and I love it. Like, again, the blood and the gore is manipulated with CGI, but the low lighting really hides it well. This is fucking nasty. This is like a modern version of the boiler room scene from Hellraiser 3. This wasn't my favorite scene in the movie. That's still when the mechanic gets it, but I enjoyed the shit out of this scene. Of course, everyone is fucking slaughtered but the main characters, who get away and run into Sally, who locks them in her van to use them as bait to get Leatherface to come after her. So yeah, back to what I said about thinking they were stealing the heat from Halloween. I was wrong. They full on fucking mocked that entire concept by making Sally fucking selfish and insane to the level that she would sacrifice two innocent people just to get revenge on Leatherface like 50 years later. And then the real kicker is she confronts Leatherface, gives him this huge speech about how he changed her life and how, you know, he killed all her friends. She starts naming off all of her friends, and Leatherface just does not give a shit. He just like stares at her for a second, and then he hears Lila and Melody and just walks right past Sally. I love that shit because it seems like between the first one and this one, and really you could easily cram 2 and 3 into the continuity of this, Leatherface hasn't been really killing anybody. He was just happy living with that old woman, and he didn't give a shit about Sally and her friends, and the main characters came and took that away from him, so this is actually a revenge story in a way. So Leatherface manages to corner the two main characters in the car, but then Sally comes in laughing like a fucking maniac. And this is what I wanted from Jamie Lee Curtis. I just didn't know I wanted it until I saw this movie do it. Sally is fucking selfish, insane, and manic, and despite not being played by the same actress because the original actress from the first movie died, she's just so much more entertaining in this reboot sequel. She's a fucking cartoon character, and that's what slasher movies basically are. They're absurd, all almost cartoons of the horror genre. This is why Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th were so successful. They did not take themselves fucking seriously and try to make the characters badass for no reason. Not that Sally isn't badass, she's a fucking crazy screaming woman with a shotgun. And I also love how when the big confrontation fight actually gets down to it, Sally gets dealt with pretty fucking quickly. She dies horribly, gets impaled on a chainsaw, that's the end of Sally. Again, this is what I wanted from the new Halloween movies, not fucking Evil Dies Tonight or whatever that fucking garbage was. Like, people judge this movie for trying to be satirical, and yeah, it takes it a little bit far in certain aspects, but the last Halloween movie tried to cash in on modern trends and shit. Of course, you know, they were trying to take credit, oh, the George Floyd riots inspired this. It's like, okay, but the movie came out, or didn't come out, the movie was filmed a year before the pandemic, before the George Floyd incident happened. So really, you just made a stupid movie and then tried to piggyback off of a tragic real-life event. The final climax is relatively good, but I find they dragged it on a little too long. Like, they build up the mechanic's AR-15 as being the deciding factor in the climax of the movie, but Lila doesn't fucking load it, so with Melody pinned in the car, Lila makes a run for it, and then Sally, with her last ounce of strength,
You pointed to W and S.
gives her the shotgun. There's this fake out where Lila almost dies, Melody comes to the rescue and they shoot Leatherface, and then he gets hit with a chainsaw, and now to quote the boys, they had a pretty good girls get it done moment here. It wasn't over the top. They defeat Leatherface and ride off into the sunset in their self-driving Tesla, and the two sisters live happily ever after. That's what I'd be saying if this wasn't a slasher movie, and I knew they were gonna do a killer still alive kind of stinger with this movie. That's just how slashers work, but I did not think they would have the balls to do it in this fashion. Give that a round of applause. Honestly, I enjoyed the fucking shit out of this movie. It was dumb, but it's a fucking slasher movie. Those are rarely ever deep, and you watch it to see people get killed. There wasn't any nudity in the movie, which fine, it's a staple of the slasher genre, but there was no reason presented in the movie to have nudity, and I don't think the other installments really have much nudity either. I think the third one does, but that's like the sleazy installment. My god, this movie was just an easy sit. Like, I came into this movie fucking expecting to hate it, and it was just like It's Pat, where I had this expectation in my head that it was just gonna be this horrible movie, and then I just ended up enjoying it. And when that happens, it's like such a pleasant surprise that it amplifies your overall opinion and how much you enjoyed it. So I like this movie, and I honestly don't understand why it got shit on as much as it did. Like, was it the woke shit? Because yeah, the gentrification thing was an alright starting point. The little references to gun control and wokeness were tired, and they kind of dropped off when they needed to, but it was an attempt at satire that just kind of didn't land, but it shouldn't shape your whole perception of the film. If you want a good slasher movie to just chill out and watch people die, this is your movie. It was a breath of fresh air after the complete and utter letdown that was Halloween Kills. Like, my god, I hate Halloween Kills, and looking back, I think the fact that I was starved for a classic slasher reboot, you know, that made me kind of enjoy Halloween 2018 more than I would have otherwise, because I've had no desire to rewatch it. It's mid. This is a cheap movie, but if you can't reinvent the genre, you can at least make something that is a morbid joy to sit through. Take note, Hollywood, this movie wasn't perfect, but it was enjoyable. Certainly one of my more preferred Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies. Now, I usually go with a much more dismissive sign-off, but honestly, I'm seeing the viewer counts on some of my videos and they're looking pretty good, and the like counts are getting up there, and I just want to say, if you do enjoy my videos, leave me a like, and if you want to see more, subscribe to my channel, because that will increase my engagement and help my channel grow. I'm not for profit, at least not for the time being, and I probably won't ever be, because I like to show a lot of clips, I like to show the gore, I like to fucking swear in my videos, and that apparently keeps me from being monetized. Like, I just dropped money on a brand new mic because my old mic wasn't doing it. This is just a hobby to me, so the best way you can support me is by liking my videos and subscribing to my channel and interact in the comments. I love entertaining people. It's to the point where I am pretty much just a non-profit review channel. Next time, we're gonna be stepping away from horror once once again. I know, I need to save a lot of the horror reviews because they are time consuming. And we're going to take a look at another Simpsons episode. If you're curious as to what Simpsons episode I'm going to review, I've actually left a few little clues in this video as to what episode it will be. So until then, stay tuned. That's not how that works. The video's over.